Welcome to the Troxel Podcast. I'm Evan Troxel, and in this episode, I welcome Nathan Miller back to the podcast. Before we get into it, I just wanted to say that this is episode 200 of the podcast. That is 200 deep, long-form conversations with the people shaping the future of the AEC industry. I didn't plan anything too celebratory for this milestone, but it just feels right that Nathan's the guest for this one. His ability to cut through hype and surface the real work behind innovation is exactly what this show is about. Nathan is the founder and CEO of Proving Ground, a digital design agency and software company focused on transforming how AEC firms work through data-driven tools, strategies, and services. He's also a well-known voice on LinkedIn and in industry conferences for bringing clarity and nuance to conversations around computational design, digital transformation, and more recently, artificial intelligence. Nate's last appearance here was nearly 2 years ago, and a lot has changed since then. Or has it? While AI has flooded every channel of communication in the industry, Nathan and I explore why the real challenges aren't about the tools, but about the strategy, or more often, the lack of one. We talk about the uncomfortable reality that 90% of digital transformations fail, not because of technology, but because of misalignment across leadership, culture, behavior, and incentives. We talk about the hidden costs of ignoring that misalignment and the long tail of change management work that begins after a flashy launch. Nathan also shares his SMARTS health and fitness framework that offers a clear way for firms to assess their readiness for real transformation, not just more tech. A key takeaway from this conversation for me is the high cost of misalignment in digital transformation efforts. I have lived this. When strategy, culture, and measurement are pulling in different directions, even the best tools and tactics will fall flat. As usual, there's an extensive amount of additional information in the show notes, so be sure to check all of that out. You can find it directly in your podcast app if you're a paid member, and if you're a free member, you can find them at the website, which is trxl.co. Lastly, you can really help the podcast by sharing these episodes with your colleagues and by commenting and sharing on my LinkedIn posts, which is a topic you'll hear more about in this episode. You can also leave a comment over on YouTube and engage with me and the other listeners there. And I really thank you for listening and for your support. And I hope episode 200 not only adds value to you in your thought space, but it also reminds you of why you tune into this podcast. So now, without further ado, I bring you my wide-ranging conversation with Nathan Miller. Nate, welcome back. It's been almost 2 years since you've been on the show. Can you believe it?
Has it been almost 2 years?
October of 2023 already.
Yeah.
Insane.
Okay. Yeah. I've lost track of time.
Well, me too. And just what's cool is this is episode number 200, which also I can't believe. It's pretty. It's a number. Let's just say it's a number. Yeah.
That's a lot of talking, Evan.
It's many numbers of many hours and hours of talking. That's for sure. Yeah. So you're doing the Lord's work. I think I mentioned that in the last episode. I'm trying to do some of that here on the podcast, and it's great to have you back.
Thank you. Yeah, it's been a good couple of years. I don't. It's hard to take stock of what has happened in just a couple of years' time. It kind of seems like everything's happened, but nothing's happened. There's things that are different, but a lot of things that have just sort of stayed the same.
Same old, yeah.
And of course the world keeps turning, and yeah, we can't diminish that. We can't diminish that fact. The world is still here, and it keeps on going.
It's amazing when you'd actually step back and you're just like, where are these tiny little things on this one little planet in the, right. But in our worlds, like, it's everything, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, so here's what's happened in the last 2 years. It's 2 letters, Nate, and they're probably not your favorite letters, but AI has happened pretty much in the last 2 years.
That's right. That's right. So you know how to provoke me.
Yep, poke.
So, if I think back to last time we spoke, and I'm not entirely sure if memory serves, if we covered this, but I do know that when Gen AI was kind of hitting the scene. Go ahead.
I'm just going to use ChatGPT to summarize that episode real quick. Hang on. No.
Okay. Yeah, you can go right ahead. Get right into it. we've certainly seen the explosion of artificial intelligence enabled features, tools,
Marketing.
marketing, a
Yeah.
lot of marketing, a lot of internal research initiatives happening in architecture firms, a lot of uncertainty, a lot of fear, a lot of hype, and a lot of maybe perhaps overzealous enthusiasm for the tech. And at that conversation, whether us at Proving Ground have asked for it or not, is definitely part of the dialogue that any kind of organization or a creative professional or anyone in the AEC industry, if you're part of the dialogue around tech, you're having to engage in the dialogue around artificial intelligence,
Yeah.
and by extension, machine learning and the associated capabilities. And the thread that we're trying to, I guess, guide through the needle, and in many ways it does feel like we're trying to thread a needle here, is find the kind of real world, meaningful, results based discourse around the capability, because there's a lot of claims around what AI can do for a company and what it can do for a creative individual. A lot of discourse around what it might do for jobs, either make new jobs, remove old jobs, things of that nature. But it occurs to us, and this is a through line that we've started to kind of promote in a lot of our strategic work, and in a lot of our dialogue that we try to have online and through our blog and whatnot, is the idea that the promise of AI is not sort of a self-realizing thing. Just because technology does exist doesn't mean it's going to change things in the way that the creators of the technology are claiming, that the marketers are claiming, or that anyone in the kind of media is sort of spinning it. It really does take concerted effort, and a very directed, thoughtful, meaningful approach by people and their organizations to lead a transformation that they want.
Yeah.
And I think that level of intentionality that that kind of is involved in that is really where the genesis of an AI strategy should be.
Yeah.
I think another thing that's important to know and understand is that it's been a couple of years since 2023, right? But I have yet to see, and maybe you can correct me, or maybe some of our listeners can correct me on this. I have yet to see a definitive study on business, and by business I mean sort of maybe the impact on business that AI has had in sort of a measurable way. We're certainly seeing kind of claims around, anecdotal claims around things like productivity increases or the amount of output. We can move faster on certain tasks. We can, remove certain wasteful activities by having, ChatGPT or any number of LLMs summarize meaning like this, right? But it's interesting that we still are seeing a lot of discussion about adoption around AI. But we have yet to sort of see this is where the value actually is.
Yeah.
And that's another area that we're very much invested in helping organizations discover, is okay, well, this is inevitability. We're using it. It's part of our toolkit. It's part of our, day-to-day operations now. I mean, it's on our phones. It's part of our lives. So figuring out where it can take us and what kind of impact is it going to deliver, and can we guide ourselves towards something that sort of a form of impact that we want.
Yeah. My first thought is like I just saw something came out with OpenAI this week where they've added in like mental health breaks where it's like take a break. I personally can't imagine anybody using. I mean, maybe Revit needs that too, right? Like that's a tool people actually use for hours and hours and hours a day. I can't
Right.
imagine people actually using something like ChatGPT for hours and hours. But I assume it happens. I mean, or maybe they're just being proactive about that. And there's different context, right? I could see somebody actually using it like as a psychotherapist for 6 hours a day in some way, or some version of that maybe, but not for like productivity type uses. I can't imagine, but maybe.
Yeah. So that's really interesting that I hadn't read that that they're actually adding in those guardrails into their own platform, but it does seem to be in response to a number of reports that have come out in the last kind of recent weeks and into months of people having psychotic breaks and kind of mental breakdowns through the use of these platforms and sort of a level of dependence that's being cultivated on discussion. Wow. Yeah. And it is one of those things where we've seen this and we're kind of familiar with this just through the lens of social media and the impact that social media has had on our culture and we kind of are familiar with the effects of algorithms, curating what we're seeing when we're seeing it. You've made comments on sort of the visibility of this podcast based on how algorithms change under our feet and, it exposes to certain content. It, hides other content from us. It creates social bubbles, and so on and so forth. And the impact that AI, could and will and is having on kind of our cultural sensibilities, and how we interact with information and data, certainly, I think plays a big role in that.
Yeah. It's interesting just to think about how when you use a tool like that it always ends with, would you like me to do something else? And so it prompts you, right? Like you prompted it, now it's prompting you, and it's like, use it some more. It's like that feed where they're all of these things that are out there, like what you were just talking about with social media, suppressing or exposing certain posts. Everything that's linking somewhere else doesn't get boosted, right? Because there's a risk for that platform to lose your eyeballs, lose your attention, because if I wanted you to go to my website or my podcast, your podcast app to find my podcast, I'm taking you away from the thing that you're looking at. And so all of these tools are now designed for this quote unquote engagement. And that is a behavioral thing that we've witnessed the downside effects of seriously in so many ways.
Yeah. And engagement farming, right? Is kind of what it's called. Like, how do you, and we see it in headlines. We see it in, if it's just, you need only go to LinkedIn to see how people structure their posts to get engagement on their posts. Like it's really interesting. You go to any post and they'll structure their hook to be the first line, and you have to click to read more in order to get the full thing. And then it's also very clearly a lot of it's AI generated content too.
And LinkedIn makes it so that people have to do that if you want to read more than 3 lines and not just what's above the fold, right? And so there's a gamification of it. Like I have to play that game if I want somebody to actually get to the part that I think would matter to them about my post. And it's paying. So it is a game. Like these are all games that we can choose not to play them. But at the what's the ultimate, like attention is difficult to get these days too.
Sure. I mean, there is something to be said about being able to take stances on these technologies and the choice to play the game or not. Can in fact, I think, be somewhat of a differentiator for practices. So if we go back and think about a design practice that is, hearing a lot about artificial intelligence, and the plethora of tools that are being provided and made available using AI technology in the back end. And, you have a practice that has established a sort of, ethos about design. You have a sensibility about the kind, like what makes for a good space, and what makes for an experience that people want to have in their home, in their workplace, at a sports venue, so on and so forth. The choice that you have as a professional with regards to all of these tools is selecting ones that will help you amplify the message, the ethical positions, the design culture that you've cultivated, and use that to enhance it. You don't need to grab every tool that's out there, and you don't need to chase tools either. And I think that's kind of where a lot of the attention is right now, or a lot of the discourse is on LinkedIn. It's like, oh, you've got to go for the tool that turns your sketch into a 3D animation. If you're not doing that, you're going to be left behind. I mean, that's not really the case. You would select such a tool if you think it's going to enhance your ability to be a good storyteller and enhance your ability to deliver a better product.
Yeah.
And I also think that if there's a tool that, or a platform or a service or something that is, that may suggest or be a, or might promote a design sensibility that you are fundamentally or foundationally against, then you have, I think, every opportunity to, reject that tool, or and talk about it. And we shouldn't be afraid of doing that either. There's a lot of tools out there where I look at it, I'm like, I would, if I rewind the clock and go back to my time as a designer, I would never be interested in it. But there is high, FOMO is a very powerful ocean that some people might, jump at such a tool and go for it, right?
I see people who are like the chasing the tools. Those are tool chaser people. Like they're not chasing tools to actually find the value. It's like reactive news stories, right? It's like the journalists need to be first, whatever that means, right? First to be in the feed. And I see that with tool chasers too. It's like, oh, I'm trying out Midjourney this with Runway that and whatever. And it's like, but there's never this settling on a workflow and I know these tools are changing a lot, so maybe this is easier said than done. But there's not like this, oh, here's something that works in this way that drives these kinds of results, and I'm putting my name behind that.
Right.
Rather than, I've tried out this new tool, here's what it looks like. I've tried out this new tool, here's what it looks like. I've tried out, and it's just like the conveyor belt just keeps moving. And so that doesn't add a lot of value other than just show, maybe it positions somebody as a tool chaser, right? Or somebody who's on the bleeding edge. But what firms actually need are things that work when it's difficult, right? And I think that's kind of what you're pointing at. It's like you need a tool that doesn't blow up because there is literally always a deadline, right? That's how our industry works.
Well, the high reliability, I mean, we work in an industry that requires, I think, a level of high reliability behind the technologies that we operate in, because, and I think that's also another kind of danger. I think something that firms grapple with, especially if you are on this early adoption curve with a technology subset like AI. I would venture that many of the services that we see today are not going to be there a year from now, or 2 years from now.
Sure.
Or they might be. You're going to see acquisitions. You're going to see tool sets radically evolve in different directions, and so you want to figure out which are the what are the platforms that might yield a high level of reliability for you in the future. And can you are you going to be able to depend on them? And that's actually an area that if we think about our own software development, some of the tools that we make, and the some of the product work that we might do, or if we're guiding a client on a custom solution, we will always kind of put an emphasis on like, yeah, we could go down this route, but here are the risk factors if we adopt this API that hooks into this AI, or if we kind of build on top of this library over here. We have to weigh, is this going to be there after your investment, after you've made an investment in kind of bringing this on, adopting it, or customizing it in some way. You want to have that sense of certainty around it. And I think it's fine to be, I think in some ways, a tool chaser, at least, casting a wide net, what's out there. You kind of need to do that to figure out, what's going to work and what's not. But you do want to have, I think, in the back of your mind, a sense of purpose to it, a purposeful, you don't want to do it just to do it. Unless you're an influencer and that's like your MO, and you're trying to get YouTube hits and, kind of get engagement. Right. Unless you're doing that, you do want to have sort of a purposeful approach to this level of exploration.
Let's take a quick break from the conversation to tell you about AVAIL. Is your team struggling to find the BIM assets they need? AVAIL's content management system simplifies access to all of your firm's content in one easy-to-use platform. No matter where your files live or what type of files they are, you can easily search and access them from AVAIL. Now, designers can consistently find and reuse all types of content. So what does that mean? Well, standards compliant models and drawings are easier to create. The documentation process is less chaotic. New hires are easier to onboard. Projects are delivered faster with fewer errors. You get the idea. Visit getavail.com to try AVAIL for free and request a free demo. That's getavail.com, GETAVAIL.com. My thanks to AVAIL for supporting this episode of the Troxel Podcast. And now let's get back to the conversation. Yeah, I see it from both ends being useful in a firm, right? Where it's like the part that you're talking about with the strategy that you were referencing earlier on in the conversation. It's like you got to figure out where you want to go and then figure out how you're going to get there. But you got to really know where you want to go. And then on the other end of that spectrum are these tools where like these are unlocking potentially new ways to go somewhere else. And so you kind of do have to keep your eye on both of those and continually reflect on those things and iterate on those to make sure you are. But I think it's really important to always keep in mind, like you cannot get somewhere you don't know where you're going, right? And so this whole idea of tool chasing, just for tool chasing's sake, like to your point, it's not useful unless it meets some criteria that actually will, you think, and again, you can prototype, you can totally experiment, right? But it's got to give you an idea that, oh, maybe we can achieve this thing that we are trying to achieve already, or we need to modify our plan because that is so compelling. But I feel like a lot of that doesn't happen with, well, first of all, small firms don't have time for that kind of thing. They don't have somebody on staff, right? And so maybe they are just kind of keeping their eye on somebody's YouTube channel for that. But larger firms do have those resources where they can have some R&D and people can be playing with things and vetting them and then putting them through the paces and through the process and then saying, well, here's some potentials for these things. And that makes its way back into the strategy feedback loop to say, because where you're going, you should always be trying to figure out where you're going. You don't just, nobody makes a 5-year plan and then completely sticks to it, right? I don't think that's not a way to think about it either.
Sure. Yeah, you don't want it. I mean, there is an organic nature. The term digital transformation, any form of transformation, transformative, think something that is going to like change the way you work. It's not going to be over the course of 5 years. You're going to take side quests. You're going to evolve that plan. Yeah, it's not finite. But there is an aspect of having a bit of a North Star to it, right? And I think you said something that's really important there. It's like, and it's actually, I think one of the hardest parts of a strategy, and for an organization to define, is like defining what you want, because that's going to tell you. That's also going to sort of imply what you don't want to have, and that kind of level, and it's going to establish for you a critical foundation of being able to say, hey, this new capability that is kind of emerging, is this going to take us where we want to go? Or is it going to hold us back? Or is it going to be neutral and it's not going to make a difference one way or another? And that in itself is going to kind of help you figure out where to make the investment, because this stuff isn't, I mean, some of it's free right now. But certainly
that reckoning is coming.
That reckoning is coming. But if you look at some of the more powerful stuff that's coming out, there's some expensive stuff out there.
$250 a month. Yeah. Right.
Well, we were looking into different tiers of implementing Copilot on Power BI. There's like different way. There were some demos that were going around of like, hey, we need to that it kind of showed that using prompting, generate dashboard layouts, generate DAX functions, understand your model. I was like, really compelling stuff. But the tier of entry for using some of those capabilities is almost the equivalent of having an FTE on staff. So there's,
it might be more effective than an FTE. You never know.
Yeah, you never know. You never know. But at the same, but it's not. But you can't just say like, oh, this is cheap. This stuff is getting more powerful. It is getting more expensive. There are massive amounts of investment that's being made in data centers and resources, and which is a whole other conversation. There's a whole other, I think, dialogue around is the juice really worth the squeeze here? And when it comes to the level of investment that has been made in AI globally, big debate there. But you have to, if you're making an investment as a company, you want to know where you're going to go with it. You're not going to do it just because.
Yeah, I heard there's something like 12 different versions of Copilot.
Yeah, well,
it's not easy to like wade through all that either, especially for larger organizations and who needs access to what and what the capabilities they need are. So it's it kind of reminds me of like the whole licensing thing that's happened over the last 10 or 15 years, right? Like you actually need someone on staff to manage that, to manage access, to manage permissions, to do all those things that nobody used to have a position just for that kind of thing. When you have a large staff, right? When you have a large production staff, that's a full-time job. And so now it's like wading through all of these different models and what their capabilities are and what the different levels of this and that in Enterprise Copilot. And there's just so many versions of it that, yeah, it's really confusing. And most people just have fatigue when it comes to technology already. So, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we're a technology company. We're a technology consulting company, and we get tired. And I can only imagine what your average professional that may not be as engaged in the tech conversation might be feeling when they're going to say an AIA national conference or regional or state conference, and it's the impact of AI is just being like kind of pushed in various presentations, or they're getting vendor emails from vendors like Autodesk and others about new tools and processes, and it's coming at you from all different directions. Then you go on LinkedIn and it's just a continuous scroll of different kinds of clickbait around the subject, and it becomes very, very confusing very quickly, I think. And you want to find the North Star. You want to find like, okay, what is it that we want? Where is it, and how can we direct ourselves in a productive way?
This like existential threat around AI. So you mentioned digital transformation earlier, right? And digital transformation, like you mentioned, is like this ongoing transformation, doesn't stop. Like it's it's a constant thing. And I've seen even from like top people at AIA talking to architects about like, you've got to use AI. Like you drop everything you're doing. You should be doing this. And I think, the motivation behind that is, and so I'm curious from your point of view, because you're boots on the ground, helping companies through your practice of consulting, of technology, do digital, like actually transform into what their version of digital practice is going to be. And for every firm, that might be a little bit different. And then there's like this push, like you should be doing this. And I'm just curious what you would tell firms, because you are telling firms we've already kind of outlined it. It's like figure out where you're going and then figure out how to get there. AI might be a piece of that strategy,
Right.
might be a piece of that puzzle. It might not be. It might be something else. But I'm just curious, kind of how, are you seeing that kind of messaging coming from these top level organizations in our industry, and what do you think the effect of that is? Do you think it's actually making a meaningful difference for anybody?
So there are a number of components to that question. Let me think here. So I have yet to see a defined mandate from an architecture company that everyone should, like, in kind of a very blanket way, that everyone should be using AI. Just
Yeah, no, I'm seeing
because.
this more from like the AIA, not a specific company.
Yeah. I think that sensibility is kind of silly. In a lot of ways, it lacks a level of specificity that would allow for artificial intelligence to have an impact. I mean, the fact that, so there's a couple of tenets that I like to kind of refer to when talking about this particular subject. Is AI an inevitable part of our toolkit? Yes, we already see that. Whether you realize it or not, you're probably using some version of artificial intelligence on a day-to-day basis. I think it's been that way since well before the hype around AI as in sort of an explicitly called out thing has kind of made its way into the mainstream dialogue. We've been using forms of artificial intelligence passively for a really long time. I mean, if you've ever shopped on Amazon or gone with a Netflix recommendation or any of that stuff,
engines,
recommendation engines, like predictive tools like that, that's just the way that the world works. And I think when it comes to sort of the day to day, there are very kind of productive sort of everyday tools for that are AI powered that we certainly find benefit in. Doing automated meeting summaries being one. I mean, this is like sort of super mundane kind of use. Like, you don't have to have a note taker in the room anymore. Takes notes, sets the action items up.
How many AI bots do you need in a Zoom meeting? Right?
That's exactly right.
Everyone's got their own.
Yeah. So, and I also think there's a problem with such a sort of like, claims that you might be hearing through venues like the AIA. That's like, everyone has to be using AI. Well, that's a very, that AI is such an umbrella term. Like, what do you mean? Like, what do you mean by artificial intelligence?
And I think
and why?
The fear there is that, like, AEC, quote, I'm using famous podcast air quotes, has slow to adopt technology, behind the curve compared to other, and so I think that's kind of where that's coming from. But I'm curious to hear where you're going with this.
Yeah, I mean, so there's a couple of things that I think. So there's sort of there's an inevitability to it, and sure, yeah, I'll use AI, but to what end, to what degree, and what AI are you really talking about? I think is another question. I also think there's a need to sort of distinguish and understand that there are different types of AI capability that can and will impact practices differently. It's not going to be kind of this even impact that occurs. Like, yeah, an AI enabled practice is going to look like X, Y, and Z. I don't see that as being a reality. You're going to have artificial intelligence that affects project management in a vastly different way than it will affect a creative process where you're tasked with the act of design, and that also will look very different than the business development sector that needs to synthesize data and figure things out about their target clients, leads, and things of that nature. So there's a highly, I think, nuanced conversation that a firm needs to have about, like, hey, we have a business. A business is can be a very complex and multifaceted organism, And we're talking about introducing a capability that could have impact on all, a portion, or none of it, depending on where you want to go. And so you start to want to break down that problem. It's like, okay, what do we really mean by AI having an impact, and in what, to what degree, and in what part are we really talking about here?
Yeah. Super thoughtful. I mean, that's one of the reasons I love talking to you about it, is because, and I've noticed with your post too, it's like, are we sure? Like, have you read the license agreement? You blew up LinkedIn this week.
Right.
Speaking of that, you mentioned it earlier to me before we hit record, and I was like, oh, I haven't seen that. And then as we were talking, I'm like, oh, I did see that.
Okay, sure.
But like, those are really like the fine print kind of side of this story too, where it's like you're hearing use AI. And everybody knows, like, nobody reads the license agreements. And then it's like, well, here's what's actually happening, or could be actually happening with that, when you just go right into it and you just jump into the deep end.
Yeah, and this is where there is if we can maybe get into the specifics, some of the specifics around that set of LinkedIn posts I did recently, for sure. But I think as a basic kind of premise here is that you have technology and you have these capabilities. And to some degree, the capability on its own is a pretty neutral thing. It can do really good stuff, it can do really bad stuff, and it's sort of up to the user, or, the creators to kind of guide what that might be. Then you have this layer of, I guess, legalese, of organizational bias, of agenda that gets layered on to how some of these tools get promoted and somehow these capabilities get promoted. So I don't know about you, Evan. I just have an inherent distrust for very big corporations. And how they may or may not have the best interest of their users in mind when they make
VC
certain
funded
decisions.
or public, it kind of doesn't matter. Yeah,
that's right.
They don't have to be big. They don't actually have to be big.
They don't have to be big. There are agendas in play, and those agendas impact how these tools can be adopted and used by users. They can limit a user's ability to do certain things in ways of, in ways that might not be anticipated. And I think we need to take a critical look at that. Back in 2023, and I think that was the year I did the blog article about terms of service for tools like Midjourney and Stability, and a lot of hype around the generative image making, still quite a bit of hype there as well, and those tend to be getting more and more powerful. But it's also like, hey, if you read the fine print, there are questions about intellectual property ownership from the user, and how maybe the underlying training data was sourced, and concerns about ethical sourcing of information. There are concerns about exploitation of labor on who labeled the data set and how it was labeled to get to a very sort of into the powerful state that it is today. And all of these things, I think, are important facets of the dialogue around any technology. And more recently, in looking at terms of service with regards to, say, Autodesk, there are limitations in play on what you can and can't do with a piece of, you can do it, but you're kind of going against what they've defined as a sort of an acceptable use policy. There's a very clear, and I want to make sure I quote this correctly, so let me bring it up.
Let's hear it.
And I can't say for sure when these terms and conditions entered in to the Autodesk terms of use. So that's just full disclaimer. So they have what's called an acceptable use policy in their software. And anytime you use one of their offerings, as they refer to it, so Revit or platform services, things like that, you are kind of accepting these terms of use. And there is under their acceptable use policy a number of terms that you agree that you will not do certain things. And sure enough, under this acceptable use policy, you are basically saying you will not use any offering or related output in connection with the training of any machine learning or artificial intelligence algorithm, software, or system. Which is very interesting to me as like, on its face. There's
Right.
You could probably argue about, okay, what is the spirit of the acceptable use policy? How enforceable are some of these things? Terms of use in some ways are like, it's a Swiss Army knife of all different kind of things that they're trying to cover in case for any reason they may need to take action to protect their stuff, for sure. But, if I read this and I'm like thinking, I want to use Autodesk software to train, I want to use a set of Revit models to train a machine learning algorithm to do X, Y, and Z. Well, according to the acceptable use policy on its face, I can't do that, which is kind of crazy, right? If we think about...
Yeah. I mean, you authored, obviously you used a authoring tool to create that thing, but you are the author of that. And I think that is interesting, especially when, okay, so let's just, for the sake of argument, assume that you are interpreting that correctly.
Yeah.
I mean, with the Autodesk AI announcement at Autodesk University, I guess it was 2 AUs ago, it was like our users are opted in automatically, right, to this, and they can opt out. Which, when you're doing a lot of training, I mean, that I think makes sense for business for them to do it that way and to let people know at AU, whoever's there, whoever happened to catch that, and however else they decide to message that to people. I'm sure it's not 100% coverage, right? So I'm sure there's a lot of people opted in who don't know they're opted in, and they're not reading the fine print here to find out that they're opted in, and that they would need to do something to opt out, and then to find out that, well, not only am I opted in, but I'm opted into this, where I can't then use it for my own training purposes in my organization.
That's right. Yeah, it does. And assuming kind of like that the interpretation is correct and kind of holds up. It's very concerning, especially since we're living in an area where not only are we looking at an era where architects and creative professionals, people in the construction industry in general, are looking at ways of leveraging this technology in business-specific cases, which requires you to think about, okay, how can we train algorithms, train our own MLs, train our own AIs to leverage our business data? Our business data can be comprised of EWGs. It may be comprised of RVTs, right? So we want to use these. We want to be able to use these capabilities. But there is technically, if we're trying to also be a compliant organization with the technologies that are at our disposal, there are things here that are like, whoa, by doing so, we would not be complying with an acceptable use policy. And then you start playing a game of, well, what is the likelihood that term comes into play and there would be action taken against that? But that's not really the point. In my view, it's like, yeah, maybe not. But you're still kind of playing you're doing a calculus of, RE. And I think the bigger point here is that you have a dialogue that is occurring through terms of use. And what I'm trying to kind of promote with the LinkedIn post is that you're starting to see a trend, and I think similar terms exist within Adobe and Salesforce that start to suggest that there is a protectionist approach for these companies, wherein they're trying to lock down their capabilities and then what they're able to do with their offerings and data to perhaps protect themselves against a potential competitor coming along and doing something powerful with RVTs, Revit files, before they can. And by having that in there, they're able to sort of protect themselves against that. And And, in some ways I think about the idea of if you've heard the term, the walled garden approach,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That's like the early days of the internet where you had like AOL, you had,
CompuServe.
CompuServe,
Mm-hmm.
the walled gardens of like proprietary internet that just created, information silos and further, just made integrations and interoperability untenable. And this kind of seems like, okay, well, if we start creating a protectionist approach to these capabilities through software vendors like Autodesk and others out there, then we're all of a sudden kind of taking, in my view, a step backwards on the interoperability front and the ability to have an integrated, an industry that is more integrated than it was in the past.
Yeah. Let's take a short break from the conversation to invite you to join the most influential technology leaders in the AEC industry at Confluence. Composed of in-person events and a podcast co-hosted by yours truly, Confluence is designed to foster conversations between AEC firms and technology companies so they can learn, share, and engage with each other to support industry innovation. Software company AVAIL, which creates content management solutions for the AEC industry, started hosting Confluence events in 2019 to understand what firms are needing, wanting, and thinking around technology. To learn more about Confluence, explore upcoming events, and listen to podcast episodes, go to confluence.getavail.com. My thanks to Confluence for supporting this episode of the Troxel Podcast. And now, let's get back to the conversation. I think about this recent example, and so I may not be getting all these details correct, but there was a case, I believe, brought against Meta for training their model on books. And
Sure.
They argued, again, if I have the company wrong, it kind of doesn't matter. Like there's a version of this story that is correct, and the company name is a big company. Right? So,
Yeah.
whoever it is, but basically the argument was like, because individual writers, publishers were like, no, they used the books without permission. They had a giant library of these things to train their model. But the argument was that the books on their individual offerings, these individual books, have no value because they're so small. But together, there's a ton of value. And so now it's interesting to kind of see that playing out almost in reverse here, where it's like, you can tell that Autodesk sees a value in the work product of those models. And in aggregate, there's a bunch of value. But even in the small version, there is value there because it's the piece of the larger thing that they are using to train their models with, and they don't want somebody else doing some version of that for themselves.
Yeah. Well, it's it's sort of like AI wars, isn't it? We saw it earlier this year with when DeepSeek came out, where all of a sudden, we've had ChatGPT, we've had various versions of the the prompt text prompt text chat prompts, things like that, and DeepSeek comes along and says like, oh, we have, and it's a Chinese originated AI platform. And it was trained more cheaply and performed better and did all these different things. And people got really excited about it. I haven't heard too much of it in like recent weeks or months. Right. But OpenAI then made claims and that says like, well, the only reason it's so performative is that it trained itself off of our AI.
Right.
And then they made a claim that, hey, this isn't good.
Theft.
This is theft. This is theft.
Right.
They stole it. But OpenAI's, where did your data come from? Like, well,
that's not what we're talking about.
That's not what we're
the issue. Look over there.
Look over it. Exactly. And so, at the end of the day, it's like it's just a level of silliness. And it's like, hey, we took a lot of data without end user permission over here to make this really powerful thing, and then this other entity over here, took our thing and made an even better version, and it it's a comedy, isn't it?
Yes, it is. It's what's interesting is like it was years and probably decades ago at this point. Kirby Ferguson came out with this idea. Everything is a remix. Have you heard this?
Yeah,
Everything is a remix. Literally everything. Like it's funny. Is like you can't use this to do that. It's like, well, that's what architects do. That's what everybody does. You cannot cut off the experiences you have and come up with a completely original idea. That's you have all of these input senses that are constantly taking things in and remixing them in your brain. And if you come up with a novel idea, it's like pieces of a bunch of other things, right? It's not, and so in that way, it can be quote unquote original. But it's also made up of non-original parts in mostly non-original parts, right? So, and then to see all of the fighting about that, like this whole, you could probably imagine how much copyright and patents have held back innovation because they're all about protecting quote unquote innovation, right? So what a weird world that we actually live in when it comes to all this stuff. It's like the lawsuits are absolutely insane, and at the same time, all of the companies that you're talking about here are literally trying to get away with as much as they can possibly get away with.
that's right.
And protect it at the same time. Yeah.
Protect it at the same time. And you're pushing the boundaries of, what you can source and use to enhance your own offering. You are also putting limitations in place and pushing the boundaries of how far you can limit a set of your own users from and potential competitors, perhaps of kind of getting a leg up on where you're at. You said something pretty interesting, the idea of everything being a remix, and I wanted to maybe add a dimension to that conversation with regards to the idea of authenticity. And I think the term authenticity is one that I've been coming back to as really ponder both from a strategic sense what it means to have kind of a meaningful implementation of technology. What does it mean to be the organization that you are? What does it mean to be, what does it mean to have the kind of opinions and, what sets us apart from AI? When we think about what can AI not do? And I think it's interesting to think about, yes, everything is sort of a remix. We're all informed by the experiences that, and source and, information sources that we've been exposed to since we've been born. The creative process and the evolution of aesthetics, from aesthetics to the engineering to the functionality, is informed by this kind of incremental drive forward over time. But there is an aspect of, like, out of everything happening in the universe and all the potential multiple dimensions that may be occurring in parallel with what's happening to us right now, this conversation, for example, is happening right now, right here between you and I. Mm-hmm. And that is not happening anywhere else in the universe that, we know of. The probability of that, if it happening exactly the same way, is very low. And the probability of it happening in parallel dimensions is very low. So even though everything that's brought us to this point is, informed by all of these other things, the idea that something is happening right here, right now, and that we are directing ourselves in this manner is kind of sort of an authentic thing.
Sure. And
I think the same is true of creative processes, mm-hmm. and the same is true of, the ability for us to choose to use or not use artificial intelligence. Mm-hmm. And I think that's something that sets the dialogue apart. And I think it's also something that, organizations and creative people should meditate on. What is it that makes our voices important, and the conversations that we're having right now relevant, in a way that isn't just thought of as the regurgitation of everything that's happened prior.
The whole idea of a fingerprint or a soul, or it's like it's those, like, that's the level you're talking about. It's like it's unique, and like this conversation, I don't know the word I'm going to say next. I haven't planned it out.
Yeah.
It's not written down. I'm not reading from a script. I don't know what's coming next. It's completely informed by all of those experiences, which are remixes, but also, so many other dimensions to it at the same time. And so the thing that you're actually talking about is like, who are you and what matters to you and what are your values and what do you want to see in the world? Because design is a responsibility as much as it is a process that you go through. And so I think what's really interesting about what you're saying, and this is my favorite thread of all the things that you talk about, is like this authenticity. Because it actually forces you, like you said, meditate on it. I think it takes that deep introspection, like what actually are my values and what is going on in my world that's not aligning with those values, and how can I get rid of that, right? So that I can get more pure to my fingerprint, right, of what actually matters. And then how can I put that out into the world in a responsible way? And by doing so, attract clients that align with that, for example, in a service industry, right? I think that is the conversation that really matters, because there's a lot of firms out there who are just trying to be everything to everybody. They're just trying to be competitive with their peer group, whatever it is. They're trying to not be left behind. And that is all reactive. Like that is all very wide angle lens. And I think what we're talking about here is like macro, right? It's like what is, or even, I don't know what the lens is that forces you to look back inside, right?
Right.
But this is like the exploded axonometric. Like what's going on inside there and why does that matter? Like, and that to me is a super, super important conversation that should be had in all of these organizations.
Yeah. I mean, and it's kind of interesting to think about, like, I think there's maybe a bit of surprise, when you say get in a room with an organization, like leaders of an organization about a technology strategy. And because when we think about technology strategy, we think about the nuts and bolts of like, okay, what software do we need to buy?
What and how, and
what are we going to train? Who are we going to train? What kind of skill, the sort of hard skills, how do we get the smarts in place for our technology strategy? But, when you actually like then confront that group with like, okay, yeah, that's part of it. But if you want to have a meaningful and lasting change occur in your company, there's going to be all of these other factors, and it's going to require you to think about who you are and who you want to be that you're maybe not currently
or encouraging them to be really comfortable with who they actually are. Because it's, I think a lot of times people want to be anything else, right? And it's like, well, you're always trying to be something else. You can never be who you actually are.
Well, it's the anxiety of, I think this is what AI has done. I think this has actually probably been one of the more healthy aspects of AI anxiety. AI makes people anxious. People get anxious about, what is this going to mean for my job? What is it going to mean for my career? Am I going to lose my job in the future? Is her architects obsolete? These are all things that we've heard. And someone that is comfortable and confident in who they are and the value they bring, those questions don't really come into mind. What they do is they see that there is this capability now in front of them, and that capability they can evaluate to see, is this going to enhance my ability to be the best me that I possibly can be, or is it going to take something away that I never want to give up? And I think that's sort of the crux of it, isn't it? It's like, is this the thing, and how I implement it, is it going to be done in a way that supports or enhances or supercharges my ability to be who I am and who I want to be. strategy should ask those questions. I think those kinds of fundamental questions, and whether it's a technology strategy or if it's just you're engaging in a general business strategy or assessment, or or you're looking at a very kind of small area or one business sector in your business, it kind of I think it needs to ask those things for it to be effective. And I think that has also an effect on how you bring people in your organization on board.
Yes.
With the strategy and the approach.
Mm-hmm.
If we look at digital transformations, the statistic is that 90% of them fail.
Yeah.
Outright. And it comes down to this inability to change the behavior of the people that are on your team. They might be locked into certain ways of doing things. They might be locked into certain biases.
Incentives.
The company may not be incentivizing people in the right way, or they might be measuring performance in certain ways. But by, I think, reaching in and finding these reasonings for why a change is important, how it might tap into the essential nature of your professional attitude, or the attitude of your business, tapping into that can all of a sudden create a very powerful motivator for bringing people on board, and communicate why a thing like AI or machine learning or building information modeling or computational design or any of these things are important.
Yeah.
And it gives them something to kind of latch onto that isn't sort of superficial.
Hey everyone, let's take a quick break from the conversation to pay some bills around here. This episode of Troxel is brought to you by Troxel Plus members. That's right, my incredible paid supporter members are making this episode possible. Their direct support ensures that I can continue exploring the intersection of architecture, technology, and the future of design with the leading voices in our industry directly to you. So let's talk about why you might consider financially supporting the podcast too. By becoming a Troxel Plus supporter, you're not just helping sustain these conversations, you're also gaining exclusive benefits like ad-free episodes of the show and my Leadership Edge email newsletter, where I analyze episodes and deliver the insights and key takeaways right into your inbox. Your small contribution makes a huge impact. And if you've been enjoying Troxel and want to be part of the community that keeps it thriving, please consider joining today. Head on over to trxl.co and click the subscribe button either in the upper right-hand corner or at the bottom of the page, or you can visit the link that I've put into the show notes. Once again, my sincerest thanks to the Troxel Plus members who have made this episode of the podcast possible, even though they aren't even hearing this ad because theirs are ad-free. Now, let's get back to the conversation. You're talking about these new staff members coming on, and I'm curious how you think of this, because to me, that could mean like the next version of a company, potentially, if they're able to retain those people for some meaningful amount of time. But then there's the people who are there, right? Who have maybe those incentives and those set ways of doing things. And those are the hard ones to actually change, right? Because if new people come in where there are new expectations laid down at the very beginning, that's what I'm going to do because that's what I heard, right? But then there's this other ones, like they know 3 versions old, they know 5 versions old, they know, multiple versions old. And it's like, well, that's what I was told. And I don't need to change that because the other layer to this is leadership in a firm, and people who are actually invested in digital transformation are strategizing for future state.
Yeah.
And often there's a disconnect between them and the people who literally have the deadline this week, and the way that they do things and the way they're comfortable doing things, and they don't have time for training. And it's complicated, right? The machine is very complicated. So when you're talking about this, like bringing new people on and kind of talking about where we're going and why we want to get there, I totally get that. But what about the people who have been there?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think
Do you operate different versions of your company all in parallel at the same time?
no, I don't think so.
That's really hard.
I think the premise is the same, and I think in some ways the motivator for change for those individuals and kind of shows a level of seriousness when you start getting into that kind of fundamental reasoning of why we're doing something, and is this something that is affecting the essence of our company. So the people that have been with an organization for a long time probably understand the essence of the business that you're operating in better than, some of the leaders in the company. Because you have leaders enter into companies all the time that have
Sure.
to grapple with people that have been there for longer than they have. And so I think when it comes to motivating change at that level, you have to display a level of seriousness around the reasoning in terms of why something's happening. Because I think the cynical, there have been studies done, in the similar kind of vein of 90% of digital transformations fail, and it's a failure to change behavior. Well, some of the behavior becomes very difficult to change because they'll look at they've been with the company so long, they can look at it in cycles. Like, oh, we've got a new CEO, and they have this.
The thing that they'll say too is like, well, 90% of them failed, so I don't need to pay attention to this one.
That's right. I don't need to pay. Well, that's exactly it. They will see that a change is like being proposed or is being dialogued and discussed, but they'll be like, well, if I just wait this out for 2 or 3 years, I don't need to engage with this, or I can engage with it superficially and just kind of write it out. That becomes the kind of the cynical approach. But when it comes to that, there is a demonstration of, this is where change management becomes such a powerful component of any strategy. You have to have a change management approach. And by change management approach, I mean, you don't simply roll out a set of initiatives in an organization and say, well, here they are. We'll see it. We'll be checking in on you in a few years. There is an aspect of this to where you have to constantly engage in the change that's being proposed. So we're fond of saying, like, if you feel like you're talking about something like a change in your company too much, you need to increase the frequency with which you're talking about it tenfold.
Totally.
So
in so many different ways, right? Because people receive things in different ways at different times. They're paying attention better at different times. And yeah, it's all of those things.
So there's an over communication side of it. There is also you want to give people on-ramps to how they can participate. And that's another aspect to this, is like, if you have individuals in your company that are disengaged from the change that's in front of them or the change that you want to see, it could be that they don't have the right on-ramp. And so you think about it both in terms of, well, so-and-so over here feels like they're not, might feel that like, oh, well, I'm not an AI expert. How can I participate in this? Well, even though you might not be an expert at something, doesn't mean you don't have something of value to contribute. So you start to create kind of forums, or, it could be ways for them to contribute, like their experience and what they see, and let their voices be heard in the change, and such that, people that might be charged with during certain forms of implementation may be able to say, like, oh, we never thought about the fact that so-and-so sees the most effective way of doing solving X problem for a client. We never saw it that way. Maybe our implementation needs to adjust to satisfy. So you start to almost think about the hardest nut to crack in your office when it comes to, like, maybe a certain personality or an individual that, might be stuck in their ways, may actually have the most to offer in terms of, like, providing insight in terms of for why they've done things the way that they have for so long, and why they've been a successful professional for so long in that respect. And if you kind of nudge a little bit towards them, they might actually then say, well, maybe I need to confront my own biases, because they're actually starting to show movement that's addressing something I'm interested in. So maybe I need to become a little bit more interested in what they're interested in. You start to meet halfway. And then those can become pretty powerful, I think, motivators for, really starting to see a level of participation. And then there's other things you do, like incentives, like, are there forms of training that you implement that give people a chance to try the new capability and see how it's going to impact them? Do you start to say like, hey, if you're giving this new generative tool a try, and you do something productive with it, maybe there's a budget that goes into them being able to attend a venue or, some event that, lets them learn more. And then you're investing in someone's professional development. Right. So, those are all change management tactics, like creating incentives, creating ways of giving people an on-ramp, engaging in stakeholders in a wide capacity, giving stakeholders that may not be experts in what you're talking about a way to participate and contribute and be part of user groups. And then just ensuring that your message doesn't disappear into the ether and that you're constantly talking about how important something is and why it's important.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest walls that transformation comes up against is this idea that like launching something is okay, we're done. And because it does takes a lot of work to get to the launch, right? But I really believe, like, just to underline what you were just saying, like that's when the work actually starts. Because implementation is the hardest. Implementation, adoption, use whatever word you want, like inside your firm is the hardest job for digital practice, for leadership, for anything where you are trying to go somewhere and you need everybody on staff to pull in the same direction or to push in the same direction to make that happen. And to get back to where we started this part of the conversation about like what is the why behind that is super, super important for top leadership to get people on board with, because if people don't understand why we're doing this and actually align themselves with, oh, that totally makes sense. If it doesn't make sense to them, that's where like hard conversations need to happen, right? Because if you have a company consisting of people pulling on all different directions because of incentives and personal biases and all these things, like, you can't effectively go the place that you have decided that you want to go. And so, and a company is a company, like it's a business. You need to have those values driving the culture, the decisions, that kind of team effort behind it. If you don't have that, you're never going to get there. And so then you're just stagnant, and you're actually, if you're not growing, you're dying, right? So that to me is like, that's people want to be leaders, and I call leadership a burden. Like it's hard. It's difficult. It's not necessarily a responsibility that people should be signing up for, because it is very difficult to actually make change management, for example, happen inside of a company. And it is a ton of work. And that level of consistency you have to bring to the messaging across the board in lots of different ways, and to keep doing it on and on and on, so that you literally are the broken record, is like, it does wear on people, but it is actually what's required, because human psychology is real, right?
Yeah. I mean, marketers have learned that, going back to like the AI marketing hype engine that is, I mean, we hear the same thing over and over and over, but it's always framed maybe a little bit differently. And, you wonder why am I getting so many newsletters on the same subject? Well, it's because not everyone's opening up that email at the same time. Not everyone might be interested in that subject right then. So you have to it's why Pepsi and Coke still have to market, it's part of that game. And, I think, that as you were talking about, the idea of why and, motivating people, we can see areas where that might be misaligned, and where, the reasoning why, it's good to maybe illustrate this by example. Like if you're a design company and your your motivator for your business is focused heavily on quality, like design quality. You have a certain sort of set of aesthetic criteria or sensibilities that you're very adamant about, and you are, you know, you form teams up in a certain way because of certain creative sensibilities in different markets. And this capability comes along, and that capability's main advantage is how it enhances efficiency. And you get really excited about, like, oh, efficiency. That's interesting. Like, my people are going to work faster and they're going to be able to do more with less time. But your business is calibrated around this idea of quality. And are you really going to reap the rewards of something that's going to yield higher efficiency if you're not measuring your people based on that at this point in time? Right? So you think about, like, oh, well, efficiency, that means I'm going to be spending less hours on X task. And, you know, the way with which you measure the success of a capability needs to be kind of aligned with the way that you're measuring the performance of your business. And so efficiency people like efficiency, but it may not be how your design culture is supported. Yeah. So you might want to think about, oh, do we need to look at capabilities from you want to look for capabilities that enhance, again, that reason why you're doing what you're doing. Like, if quality is a thing, you want to look at ways that are going to help you improve on your quality of output. If efficiency and these metrics for productivity are important and for your people, and that and people are motivated by that, you're going to look for certain capabilities that are going to help enhance that.
Yeah.
Going back to, maybe in some ways, to summarize this, I gave a talk on Friday at USC BIMBOB, and I summarized this notion of measurement of kind of culture and the implementation of tech in terms of three pillars or three circles of a Venn diagram that constitute a healthy strategic model, or a strategic model that can yield results. And that is under the framing of smarts, health, and fitness. So smarts being things like, investing in tools, investing in skills, investing in, the data and the workflow, and really developing those. That can only be used in a productive way if you have a healthy business, a healthy organization, or healthy culture that is accountable for such capabilities. You have leaders that are spearheading initiatives that can see those capabilities implemented in meaningful ways, and that you're also building in with those capabilities a set of ethics that kind of can govern productive uses throughout your organization. And then you have fitness, which is the way with which you measure whether or not an initiative or a strategy or something is successful or not. And those kind of three things in tandem become the three pillars with which you can start to build and design a strategy around. And a deficiency in one area, or a misalignment in one area, and like, you're measuring something in terms of efficiency, but your design culture is based around quality, and your tools and skill set are kind of all over the map, then you're not gonna have a cohesive approach. So you need to really start to think about how you dial those three areas in.
It really speaks to this idea of things working together, right? Like, you'll have individuals in organizations, you could have teams in organizations that are pulling in a completely different direction. So the firm could be about quality, right? Design quality. And they could hire a chief operating officer who is all about efficiency. And that person has a seat at the best table in the house, and they've got a voice because they've got a role that supports it. And they start pulling in a different direction because they were effective at that at their last place, right? And that's maybe what attracted this organization to that individual. Oh, they were super effective, and they got a lot of stuff done, and it's like, and it's really bad for morale of the company because the company cares about, the value is quality, design quality. And so this, like, these things really have to work together for it to be effective. And I like how you've kind of distilled it into these basic elements of health, fitness, and smarts. And the idea of still having misalignments with staff members or teams is a total real probability in there. And so the organization, the leadership has to stay on top of that, right? Because if you let it go and people start leaving because the alignment is off, like, you'll know it immediately because people will start going somewhere else because the alignment is no longer there. Like, you have to recognize, and I recently, actually, I think after this episode, I've had a recording where we talked about this. Like, people are working not for you, they're working for themselves when they work for your organization. They're looking for a certain quality of life. They're looking for certain values to be this. We keep coming back to the word of alignment, right? And if there's not that alignment, they will go try to find that alignment somewhere else. Like, I think people are just done suffering with misalignments. And it's a generalization, but I think people are pretty much done with suffering through these misalignments, and because it's easier than ever to find. I'm not saying it's easy to get a new job, but it's easier than ever to look for a new job, for sure, right? Yeah. So it's those kinds of things that happen. It's like, oh, why are people leaving? And so you got to get ahead of that. Leadership's responsibility is to make sure that alignment between these three different pillars that you're talking about are happening. I think it's a great way to frame in really, like, these are not high-tech words, right? These are things that everybody totally understands. What is healthy? What is not healthy? What is fit? What is not fit? Right? What is smart? What is dumb? Like that. That's a pretty easy thing for people to start, like, putting things into those buckets and then saying, where do they overlap, and how is that actually us?
Yeah, exactly. And you think about, and going back to those three things, and wrapping all of that together is in some ways the fourth component, which is, again, I think they all contribute to the idea of, like, what makes for an authentic organization, right? And the alignment of these components in a way that can help support who you are, who you want to be, is that perhaps the ultimate outcome out of the strategy, right? Yeah. And I think to your point, it's a fair way to look at your kind of job and your role. Like, you talk about people leaving, the clarity of purpose that you have as an organization. People might find that, I'm not with that, and they leave, and that's okay, because they, not only are they not aligned with you, and maybe you don't want to, but maybe you don't want to change as an organization with respect to what they're expecting. So knowing who you are will help you decide who's on your team and who isn't, and people on the team can decide, do I want to be a part of this or not? Yeah. And that's and that clarity, like, I think people, not only are they done suffering, but people are looking for experiences that are meaningful in their work, right? And people can decide and define what that is for them. And you, as an organization, are in a position to set out what that is and make that crystal clear what people are getting signed on to do. Yeah. And you don't want to misrepresent what that is, because you're going to bring in the wrong people, or going to bring in people that are going to leave sooner than you would want them to, right?
And that's an expensive endeavor. It's a useless, expensive endeavor.
Yes.
So it's super expensive to deal with that. Yeah, very cool. I'm glad that you had that bim bop at the bim bop. What do they call that? They call it a bop, right? It's a 5-minute presentation, because you don't need to make this into a thought leadership piece, right? Like, this is literally a concept that is a framework that is so simple. And I love how you've just been able to distill it down to that simplicity, because it's super approachable. Oh, I can do that. That's what I think when I see something like, oh, it's a great way to think about this.
Well, thanks. I mean, that's like, and that's something we can't overlook when it comes to what makes for a strategy. Like, a strategy needs to be able to communicate its components to a wide variety of stakeholders, for it to be a strategy. Otherwise, it's very tactical, and it might have a very limited audience. But we're talking about something that's organization wide, and you're talking about a digital transformation, something that's going to affect a wide variety of people. It has to be put into a language that is going to encourage participation and engagement from non-experts as well as experts.
Yeah.
And so having a simple Venn diagram that communicates like the pillars of your approach becomes critical.
Yeah. And what is actually in those pillars, right? Because that overlap in the middle, I think ultimately is your messaging to the market that you're in. And you are really able to then craft a precise message around your offering in the marketplace. And it's very easy for people to choose to work with you then, because it's specific in that way. And you don't have to have a specific offering. We only do this kind of project, and it's like, no, this is how we do it. This is why we do it. And then people choose to hire you to do that thing because you know why you exist. And you know why you're participating in the market. And that's a great place to be, because it makes the marketing team's job easy to talk about yourself, but it also is easy for clients to talk about you and talk about just creating levels of alignment there. It's like you're not 80 different things to 80 different people. No, you're this thing. And then and the internet obviously makes it easy for people to find you, because we all can gravitate towards those values that matter to us, because it's never been easier to find weirdos like us out there, right?
Yeah,
so,
right.
I mean, I think it's kind of a beautiful way to think about it, because you don't have to carpet bomb everything, right? It's like, no, you just consistently put out what matters to you, and people will find that, because I would hopefully there's not a lot of,
hopefully the algorithm doesn't quiet you, and it'll find you so long as you pay LinkedIn to boost your
right.
post a little bit, which is, there's probably a whole other podcast we could do on just that subject.
Have you ever done that? I've never done that.
Never done that. I've never done that.
It's just kind of against my values, right? It's like, oh, screw you.
Right.
Come on.
Yeah. I think I have to believe that, to your point of putting yourself out there in an authentic and meaningful way, you're kind of at the mercy of the algorithm to hopefully you hit the right keywords, and you hit the right hashtags, and it's gonna boost you and get you in front of eyes that might be but I feel like the people that are out there that you want to work with are probably already actively trying to look for someone like you. And by putting yourself out there in an honest way, and talking about the things that you're interested in, and you're really trying to be thoughtful about your ideas, and
I totally agree.
People are going to find it.
The another way to so a lot of people are interested in like gaming the algorithm, trying to figure out like what's the latest change with the algorithm, how can I get my stuff so the algorithm is favorable to me, and just replace that word algorithm with audience. Like do something interesting. And the audience, if audiences are looking for interesting things, and if you can just consistently show up and be interesting. Do something interesting. Do something useful, valuable. I always told my kids, like, be useful, right? Like that's like, that would be so valuable to me if you can just be useful. Just do the things. Like, you see the thing, do the thing. Just do it. Don't ask for permission. Just do it. I feel like we're in that position too with the world, right? And trying to find our audience. Be valuable. Do the thing that really matters to you, and do it well. And there, like you just said, there are people looking for that. They're actively looking for that. And because that's going to set you apart immediately. In the world of like LLMs and just dispersed mediocrity everywhere, premium mediocrity, it's everywhere, right?
Yeah, the noise to signal ratio is very out of whack right now. And what I've found, the most, if we, engagement isn't really a thing that I seek. But I will say that the stuff that tends to get the most attention on places like LinkedIn, at least from the content that I've put out there, are the things that are very clearly from kind of my voice, my opinion.
I was going to say opinionated. Yeah.
Yeah. And people engage with that in a way that they're not going to engage with an AI generated marketing narrative, or something that, you can look, I can find certain people in my feed where I'm like, you've got a bot that's just kind of on a schedule, putting out certain narratives that they're not coming from you, or they're coming from a place of something that's more cynical. Like, I'm going to say this because I know it's going to get a reaction. It's clickbait.
You're right.
And if you get your thought out there, your ideas out there, it cuts through the noise like a knife through butter. If you've got something to say, people will notice. It sort of it jostles you when you're doing a quick scroll and you're like, whoa, wait a minute, what was that? And there might not even be an image attached to it, but you see someone actually having an original thought, and you're like, right. Oh, okay, I want to hear what that person is saying.
How rare.
That's right.
Awesome. Well, I think that's a good place to wrap up this conversation. I guess I'll see you in 2 years.
Yeah, and may the algorithm find our podcast together.
Yes, please, algorithm gods. Yeah, get this out there. If anybody wants to know who this Nate Miller guy is, I'll have links to him on LinkedIn and Proving Ground website, where there's an amazing blog for people who are interested in digital transformation. You make a lot of tools. We'll have links to some of those in the show notes as well. Is there anything else that you want to help point people toward you?
I will just say to everyone out there, be authentic and read the fine print.
Nice. All right, man. Till next time.
All right. Take care. Thank you.
All right. Don't leave. I'm going to hit stop. Thanks to our sponsors, and thanks to our members this week. Find out how you can become a member at trxl.co. And I'll talk to you again next week.